Section A of Unit E1 is all about unit vocabulary. In class, we did a lot of work with like taking a whiteboard, and I would call out some of these terms in here and have the students practice writing them. So a good way to kind of practice even before working on this would be to have something like scratch paper and just make up terms and try to study them. So I'll go through what these answers are with some examples. Number one, the most basic member of a set of fractions with the same denominator is called a unit fraction. So member is kind of a singular idea, and a unit here, unit fraction. Unit fraction means you have like 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6. The numerator is always a 1 in a unit fraction, so that's where the unit part is. When two or more fractions have the same number in the bottom, it's called having a common denominator. I'll just abbreviate it, common denominator. So it's pretty easy. When you look at this set on this page here, you have 7/4, 5/7, 15/21, 2 3/4. You've got 4 twice, so that's the common denominator. Circle the two fractions showing that. Pretty straightforward. When the top fraction is larger than the bottom, it's called an improper fraction. We talked in class like it's top-heavy, improper, top-heavy, improper fraction. So any fraction where the top is larger, 3/2, 4/3, 5/4, 6/5, and so on, those are all improper fractions. A fraction that has a whole number to the left, like that right there, is called a mixed numeral. And of course, these are terms that just have to be memorized. If you're going to do them on a test, you got to know them. They're basic vocabulary. This section right here, we had a hint that we worked a lot with, and it helps students in a number of ways. We just worked with the idea that people say to put your name and date on things, and the idea with that is, of course, that they always say name before date. Nobody says put date and then your name on it. It's always name and date. And so that idea is then transferred to the numerator, always comes before the denominator in expressions and in the way you write them. And then we simplified that. Numerator over denominator like that. And the only one that doesn't fit that sort of pattern is if you have the division symbol and you're trying to figure out where a numerator and denominator, the numerator doesn't come first, the numerator is here and the denominator is here when you're making fractions. So these always have the n before d, n over d, but actually this is the only one where it switches around in order. So students need to be really careful. If they know what those two words are, they have to be careful. It says denominator and numerator. Don't assume that I'm going to give the numerator first and the denominator second. You got to be ready for that. 7 divided by 4 and 9 out of 10. Numerator always comes before denominator. Numerator before denominator. So that's the numerator and that's the denominator. That's the numerator and that's the denominator. And if you just put the slash through it like a fraction, 7/4, 9/10. Numerator before denominator and the slash is in the middle. Pretty straightforward. The sum of 2/5 4 times. I would really encourage students, to look at what that fraction is, 2/5, and just to simply rewrite it. This is kind of the first part of the exercise. The sum in this case is adding, so students need to be aware of that. And that is 4 times 2/5, which is 8/5. And that's all they needed to do as far as answering that one. Halves is a kind of tricky one for students to get for whatever reason, just because halves isn't tooths. We have thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, but we don't have tooths. We have halves. And they need to remember that anything over 2 is a halve. And in this case, it's 5 halves, and so just be ready, because if I say 1/2 or something like that, it could be different. So just be aware of that. 3 3/4, 3 and 3/4. The and part is always for the fraction, and the first part is for the whole number. So again, if I were trying to help a student at home with this, I would review these key terms here. I would maybe get some scratch paper and just call out things and have the student write it and see if they can write several in a row that you make up that are like this or whatever. And then on the top, just know that on the assessment the order of these is likely going to change, and so the students, it would be bad to think of the first blank as unit fraction and just not even read it. If I switch these around and have a different order, you got to be ready that unit fraction is one of the answers, but it may not be the first one necessarily.